let's see, what is this, March 11th?
Yeah.
March 11th, 2004,
Yeah.
which is how many years after you started fishing?
Well,
How old were you when you started fishing?
I was 18 when I got my first license. I got my first commercial fish license. I was the youngest on the Great Lakes at the time.
You were.
Yeah. 18, you had to be 21 even back then to have it.
So how'd you swing that?
Well, I got it to Grandpa Erickson. He had a heart attack, and so they give me his license,
Uh-huh.
1215, and I had it for 49 years before the DNR bought it out.
Yeah.
But I started fishing maybe when I was about 16 with him.
And that was with whom now?
Martin,
Martin Erickson,
yeah,
who was your grandfather.
my grandfather.
Yeah. And when did he start fishing?
At the turn of the century, he started working for Booth Fisheries. And when he came from, well, I'd say this in the early, well, maybe 1910 or earlier than that, maybe, I don't know. But I know he was fishing for Booth right after the turn of the century anyway.
Was he fishing out of his own boat or?
Well, no, he worked for Booth first, then he started, and then he bought a,
So how did that work when you worked for Booth? Did they give you a boat or what?
no,
No.
he bought his own, he started out with a rowboat and hand lines. That's how he started fishing.
The way they used to do in Norway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's how he started out with a rowboat. Then he bought a small little boat with an engine in it, and he bought a couple boxes of nets, and just kept on. And in the meanwhile, he was still working for Booth on their fish boats. I don't know if I ever showed you that, but I'll show it to you after. But I got that picture of him back in the 20s when he was fishing herring on one of Booth's big tugs.
Mm-hmm.
But that was one of his first jobs when he came from Norway. And also he logged on Oak Island too, which he never got paid for.
Why?
Well, they went broke. He always said they had $89 coming, all winter's work, and they got to town. There was a warehouse, I think, they logged out there, and they went bankrupt.
Ah, see.
So he worked, but he always told the story that they give me warm mitts and warm shoes, warm socks. That's what he always told me, and they fed real well. But he never got paid. He worked all winter for $89, and so yeah, he said, I always said, what would that be worth today? That money over
With
down here
interest.
100 years ago
Yeah.
with interest. So
What was the name of his first boat?
the first boat, I think he had some pictures of it. There was no name on it, for the little one he had. Then the next one he bought, a little bit bigger one, was named the Clarice, and he fished that for quite a few years. Then
The Clarice?
the Clarice, yeah,
Who was that named after?
after his daughter,
Mm-hmm.
and then he named. Well, then in '41 he had other smaller boats, but in '41 that's when he built the Marianne, which is still Dick Gurno still, or not Dick, but his son owns it yet.
It's still working, still fishing?
Still working. That was built in '41.
Now who built that?
Evan Christensen.
He was a local boat builder?
Yeah,
Did you know him?
I know him real well.
What was he like?
He was quite a guy. He was a nice guy. Matter of fact, he and Elvis Moe built the Nancy Lee, which I owned one time too. My grandpa owned it first, and I bought it from him.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a couple other boats we had before that, but the Nancy Lee was the last one that Grandpa owned. And when he passed away, I bought it from him. I bought it in the state or whatever. But the Nancy Lee was built on Sand Island in 1937.
Hmm.
And so that was quite a history. And I think that was the first one that Avon built. But he built the Bobby, he built the San Adam, built the Two Brothers, built the South Twin, built several boats. Avon did.
Mm-hmm. Did he work alone, or do you have?
Well, whoever he was building the boat for, I know like Uncle Mel helped him build the Marianne. And that was built right down by Bodine's there. An old fish house they used. And Mal worked there. As a matter of fact, they cut the keel on her up at Whiting, on the Whiting Road there, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And there was an old sawmill down by on Silver Flats. It was at Erickson and had a sawmill there, and he cut the keel on her. I was 11 years old, so and I followed Mal around like a dog all the time, and so but they dragged it down. That's where they cut the keel for that boat.
So how do you cut the keel for a boat?
Well, they put it on a sawmill, and they usually run about 8x10 the keels. That's the main backbone of the boat. That's what they start out with, and that's where the keel was cut for it. So.
And who else was building boats in Bayfield at that time?
Well, there was LaBelle's were building boats, and of course, Julian's father-in-law there. Frank Mulkey.
Right.
I used to hang around Frank's place all the time too.
Did you?
Yeah, I was always, when I was just a little kid. Frank was quite a boat builder. Matter of fact, I think the last boat that Frank built was the Donnabelle. Jack Erickson's boat. That was the last, but he built several boats. He built it for Bodine's. A lot of his boats went to the North Shore. Frank Mulkey's boats.
So how long would it take to build a boat?
Well, they used to start. They started in the fall. I remember that time when it was in late kind of about November, I think, and they had the Marianne was completed by spring. Mal and Avon worked on it all winter long. I think Mal worked on it. He got $1 an hour. And I don't think Avon. He was the boat builder. I think he may have got $1.25 or $1.50.
So what would it cost to have?
Back then, I know the Marianne cost the old man $900 to build. You couldn't even buy one. It would cost you more than that to put the floorboards in it today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What would it cost to build one of these tugs today?
Well, for instance, the one like the Cindy Marie, if you had built her from the one I owned, she was a Vanetti boat by Net, built in Escanaba, Michigan, and I checked on it. Maybe 15 years ago when I was still fishing. I went to the boat building place, and I asked him a question, how much would that boat cost today? And he told me I'd put a brand new engine in it, running lights, and you could run it to Bayfield, he says, for $150,000.
Whoa.
So that's, and I think didn't cost that much to build it in '63, but that's what it would cost today to build her. Or maybe more now, a lot more now.
Yeah.
But this was 15 years ago.
Because that's a steel hull.
Or the steel house with a wooden house. Yeah.
Because the old boats were wooden hull. Right?
They're all wooden hull.
Was the Marianne built as a wooden hull?
She was built as a wooden hull, and they put a little steel skin over it, which it's got today. It still has. Otherwise, I don't think she'd be floating much.
Yeah.
It was built out of cypress, so the planking stays forever. But the ribs and stuff, whatever, that's what goes to heck on them. And the ribs, when Uncle Mal had it, he replaced the ribs in it. And he took real good care of it. He put new rails on it. And but today that's a kind of a patch-up job. They cover up all that old wood. But years ago, they didn't do that. They replaced all the rotten wood in there.
But cypress, so that had to be shipped in, that cypress.
Yeah. That's the planking is still good in that boat. It doesn't rot. And like that old Bobby that's laying by, down by the dock, or they call it Uncle Butts, but the original, her real name was the Bobby, and that belonged to old Bert Noring. So, but that's, the planking is still good in that boat. And talk about the Egerson, that belonged to Carl Ludvigsen. Then when Carl quit, it was the boat wasn't very long. It was a very short boat, the old Egerson. Well, then Joe LaBelle and Cubby, that's right where the boat barn that they have in downtown today where the museum is. That's where LaBelle's boat, build their boats in there. And they took them, one winter they lengthened it out. That's when Carl Dahl bought her. They put a new house on it and all. They just cut her in half and they lengthened out the keel. I think they added about, I think that boat was only about 32 feet long. It was a little stubby little thing. Or maybe 28 maybe.
What's a normal size tug?
Well, back then they were around 40, 42. You know, that was the average. And a lot of the guys are way back there fishing them smaller too, but as years went on, after the war, then they built bigger boats. They built them and bought them.
And where did that design come from?
Even had that, the Marianne design, each one of Frank Malky had his own design. The LaBelle brothers, they had their little design. And like Avon had his own, and all three of them, they had their own characteristics, all three of them. The ones that were built in Bayfield.
Who had the reputation of being the best boat builder? Were they all?
Well, old Frank was very, very particular, because he always says, I don't put no scrap in my boats. And and old Henry Waxman used to go round and round, because Henry liked to slip in some poor material, and old Frank would throw him out the door, and they'd have a big fight over that. And so, yeah, it was, like I said, I used to hang around all those boat yards down there. I mean, when they were building boats when I was a kid. And Frank he'd tolerate you so long. And as long as you behave, just watch.
Yeah.
Don't get into nothing.
Don't get in the way.
Yeah. Avon was more even-tempered. I mean, he didn't. So.
Well, Frank was the old German, wasn't he?
German, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was quite a guy.
Who was it? One of either Jack or I think it was Julian. They're talking about the dis and dat.
A Dis and Dot. That was.
Dis and dot.
Yeah, the Dis and Dot. He that was built for. Trying to think. Somebody at Madeline Island had her. Frank built it, and so the guy said, "What do you? I need some of this and I need some of Dot." That's what he, was that, and they named her the Dis and Dot. And as a matter of fact, I fished on that one.
You did?
Yeah. So Ernie LaPointe owned it, and we rented it. Grandpa and I rented it one spring. It was up in Cornucopia, and we had our little boat down here, so we rented the Dis and Dot. But I think the Avon had the best lines, and a better. I don't know. It was a nicer boat. I was nicer lines than Avon's boats. And so, but old Frank made them tough and rugged. And the ones that Joe LaBelle built, like the old Fair Lady, and she's gone now. But the Queen, that was one of the last boats he built. That was for old Chris Hadlin. And boy, that sucker could roll. I fished in that one too. That was after Martin Peterson bought it. It was built for Chris Hadlin though, during the war. Then there was the Stranger too. I forgot about her. That was Halver Wrighton and Ted Bainbridge had that built, I think. It wasn't a Mulkey boat. I'm sure it wasn't.
Did Halver build boats too?
Yeah, they were building boats.
Yeah.
They made a big pond boat one time. They were new, like a barge. Matter of fact, that's the one that boat that Halver had was when they moved Julian's cabin from Julian's Bay to Rocky. And that cabin was moved 4 times. Now it's in a resting home there now, where it's sitting now. Matter of fact, that was 100 years old. They had that. They had a reunion last year out there on Rocky.
Yeah, Julian told me about moving that boat.
Yeah,
Or that
cabin.
Just about didn't make it.
Yeah, I know it.
Were you involved in moving that too?
No. I was the last move. It was I helped move it. Where she's sitting today. So.
Well, there was a hell of a lot of activity around here then. In those old
Oh
days.
yeah, there was.
How many boats do you think were going out in the heyday? From
Well, there
Bayfield?
was. I bet there had to be at least 40 of them running out of Bayfield alone. Not counting Port Wing and Cornucopia.
What if you took them all in this whole area together? How many would there might have been? Would there been 100?
There was, I think, yeah, well, there would have been 100 boats, yes. Because at one time there was 100 commercial fishing license, 150, I think they sold. Yeah, that was 150, and so they all had boats. I remember talking about Madeline Island, Port Wing,
Yeah.
down the shore. There was quite a few in Madeline Island. What the hell was his name? Oh, the Crones over there. There was another, Albert Crone built a couple of fish boats too.
Uh-huh.
Because he built one that we had once. It was built on Madeline Island. And yeah, Arvid and Emil Erickson, there was another one that was another boat builder on Madeline Island. Because matter of fact, he rebuilt the Nancy Lee for Grandpa. Put 72 new ribs in her, new rails, new house. Because when he bought her from, when Grandpa bought it from Booth Fisheries, Ole Olson owned it, and it was gone. It was shot to hell. It needed a lot of work, and so then, I think he gave Booth $500 for it, and Emil Erickson from Madeline Island rebuilt it, because I helped him rebuild it, rebuild it.
What year would that have been?
Let me see, 19. I say about 56, 57 when he completely rebuilt it. I was married anyway. I got married in 54, so.
Mm-hmm.
And we fished in that fall. Elvis Moe, they rebuilt the engine in her. And Emil was quite a character, you know, if you ever heard about him. He was drinking it quite a bit, which Grandpa didn't approve of, but he always told him it was getting close to herring season. So he finally went down to Elvis, says, put the engine away, take it out, I'm not going to put it in the water. So Elvis said, don't worry about it, Martin. He said, we'll get it done. And so then even Elvis went and helped, there was 3 or 4 of us trying to get Emil to get it done. Matter of fact, we put her in the water, and I took it over to the boathouse, the Lullaby boathouse, and put it. It was in the fall, because it was in November, and we were going to go start fishing herring, and it didn't have no windows in it. So I cut the windows in it, and we built the pile house, and we stuck that on there, and then we went out and fished herring with it that fall.
Well, would Emil just go on a bender? Or?
He'd want a bender and just want to. He always used to tell Grandpa, he said, Martin, he said you worry too much. He says.
He didn't worry.
No, he didn't worry. Nothing. No, he didn't care if the school kept it or not. So, and then there was, Emil built the Halifax. So then he built another, what the hell was the last one he built? I can't think of the name of that right now. Emil's boat. And then he built the Gubin. That was a little boat for, he built that for Leo Capser, his little pleasure boat.
Mm-hmm.
But then also Emil built, him and his brother, and they built the Garhow, the first one, the old wooden one. They built that on Madeline Island too.
That was the ferry.
The ferry boat, yeah. So I don't know. See, he was Emil was brother-in-law of Howard Russell, so maybe Howard kept him sober enough that time to get the thing done. So,
Howard Russell was running the Garhow.
yeah, he
Yeah.
owned the ferry line there.
Right.
Yeah. So, but there was some. We put in a lot of tough herring season. I know that.
Now, herring season started when?
It was the peak on Thanksgiving because we never. Remember, we come home. We never ate a Thanksgiving dinner. But a lot of times, because back then there would be so much herring in the boat that we hated. We had another couple hours. We always ate late at night, or maybe we had a blow day. It would be the only time we ever ate a Thanksgiving dinner because that was always the peak of the season. And it used to start around the 15th, the 10th, the 15th of November.
And last how long?
Well, after that's maybe 3 weeks of good fishing.
Mm-hmm.
So
And why were the herring running at that time in such big
that's when
numbers?
they're spawning. That's the time of the year they're spawning.
Where would you go to get the herring?
Well, all the way from Little Girl's Point to outside of St. Allen. And way back during the war and stuff, Erneville Point, they fished out of, they'd fish around the islands first, then the last herring would be up at, they go to Duluth and fish out of Duluth. Way into, put it up to Christmas sometime. Why they were later up there, I don't know, but they were later. So after but St. Allen was the biggest, one of the biggest, and Russell's Bay and Big Bay, Madeline Island.
But they were out in the open water, right?
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's what they always called St. Allen, the hellhole of the lake, because she was rough out there.
Was it?
Always. I don't know why. It was. That's when they had the the steel men and the wooden boats
Yeah.
last out there. So
Yeah, November, the gales of November.
the gales,
I mean,
November, yeah.
I mean, that's not a time to be out in the
No.
middle of the lake, is it?
And all these, like I said, all these boats, they were like the Nancy Lee, and she was a 5-ton boat. I mean, carried 5 ton, but the most I have had in her was 8 ton, weight up fish. And like the Mary Ann, she's a little bit bigger boat, and she was about a 7-ton boat. The Mel had, I think that's the biggest load. It had close to 12 ton in her one time. When she came in, she was laying the water. The rails were right even with right on the water.
Oh, boy.
And there was this Lee Murado and Mel was the only 2 on the boat because it was on a Sunday. The crew didn't show up. The rest of the bunch didn't show up. So he and Lee Murado, they went out and lifted the nets, and they came in with 12 ton that time, and that was weighed up fish.
Now, when you'd haul in the herring in the nets, you'd just leave them in the
Pile them in the boat, then we had a bunch of people down there picking herring, and
on shore.
on shore. And there's only a couple. Well, Morse Baton, I think there's one shack left down there at Bodine's herring house. They used to pick out the herring. But from where Bodine's is all the way up out to the end, that was all small individual picking houses, and over the Booth Fisheries is the same way.
The Booth Fisheries were where the
Where
ferry
the
building is.
ferry boat is.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I got a picture of myself there pulling herring out of the boat, and that on Booth Fisheries dock there. Because Morse Baton was down there, Ted Neese was down there, the Ole Olson. There was several, and trying to think. What was his name? Oh, Carly Myers was fishing down there at that time. And Butts Peterson, he was picking herring. There was a lot of herring come into Bayfield. And Elmer Henry, the Henriksons, they were all over the booth. Then The Hadlands had quite a crew over there too, you know. Then the Johnsons. I'll tell you, Bayfield smelled like a herring. One big herring. So, well, yeah, if, Hadland, you know, Irv Hadland. That's down where the Reuben Nelson dock is there now. Where they got the yacht club there or whatever, I mean, the marina.
Mm-hmm.
In the Black Hawk area. See, Irv Hadland he had a fish house out there, and Irv was quite a entrepreneur.
Was he?
He really was. Because the time, I'll tell you, and this is a true story, because Grandpa was a hard fisherman, worked hard. And he never, he worked for the company store at Booth all the time. That's why anybody that ever worked for Booth Fisheries never got rich. Because they always kept you, they always fed you well, but that was the old company store, baloney. And Irv Hadman come to Martin one day, he said, Martin, he said, you want to make money? He says, you come sell your fish to me. And Irv was the type of a guy, he needed the commercial fishermen so he could make money. Without the commercial fishermen, he didn't make any money. For Irv, a lot of times I remember the kid, Martin would come with a check, because of whatever the price of fish was, if there was an extra 5 cents that he got, he took a commission, but he always returned that back to the fishermen.
Mm-hmm.
So kept them happy. And this is back in the late 40s, late 40s. And I'll never forget the quote that old Martin made. He said, he told Christine, he said, no, I never thought I'd ever lived long enough to see $10,000 in the bank. He made it in 1 month, fishing whitefish in July. So I mean, that was a difference. He wanted the fishermen, but Booth wanted to keep you. That's what they were. The company store stuff.
Yeah.
That's the way they operated all their life. And I fished for Booth for years, but I never started making any money until really I started working for, fishing for Roger Bedeen.
Mm-hmm.
And Roger, but he was on that, Roger was the guy that felt, I mean, he had to have the commercial fishermen to make money. So a lot of people talk, Roger this and Roger that, but Roger was a pretty straight shooter as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm.
And well, that's the same way when I don't think a lot of the guys after Otto Alkeen came here. I know Julian moved over there, over to where Bodines is now. The Otto Alkeen company owned it. I think Julian started making a few dollars too when he left Booth Fisheries.
What company was that?
Otto Alkeen.
Uh-huh.
They were here right during the war. The herring were thick, and there was several boats went to work for him. I mean, sold their fish to him.
Right.
So, matter of fact, there was 1, 2, 3. There was 4 people buying herring back then. There's no competition no more.
Now there's only one.
Only one.
You either sell it to Bodine or
Yeah,
what?
that's what a lot of these guys went by themselves,
Yeah.
like Morris and Dean Halverson. So they need the it's a tough racket today. It always was a tough racket, but I mean, I think they're making more, but they're getting more volume. But the price of everything, the price of fuel, it's a lot more money today.
Yeah. Well, back to the herring. In a good herring season, what could a fisherman make? How many ton would one?
Well,
one
okay,
boat
the
go?
most I know Mal, Julian, some of the bigger boats, they always figured 100 to 110, 120 ton. And if they always figured after 100, it was all gravy from then on in. But so all those bigger boats, they got about, they all run over 100. Most I caught was about 65. And that was for the size of the boat, it was all I could haul. And the most, but I say any of the bigger boats, they average around 100 ton. I know Hermie Johnson, they always used to run way over 100.
And what were herring selling for then?
Well, back to Booth again. I got, but I was using their nets and stuff.
Uh-huh.
and I think I got $65 a ton, 55. I started out, I got 55, and then went to 65. But then out of Alkeen and them other guys and Irv Hadlin, they were paying another $10 extra a ton. So, but I didn't have any. I was using booth nets at that
Yeah.
time,
So you had to sell the booth.
so I had to sell at the booth
Yeah.
until I got my own nets
Mhm.
for herring nets
So
especially.
when was this now? What years
What years?
that you worked for Booth?
Well, I quit. I would. Let me see, Roger. I was there in '48 yet. 50. Is I'm trying to think. Pretty much all the 50s,
Mm-hmm.
because I bought the Cindy in. She was built. I bought the Cindy in 1970. But I was fishing for Booth pretty much all those years, under the ice and till on my own with after Grandpa died. I mean I was, but then I used to. They furnished a place to tie the boat up too. Well, then it was pretty well filled up down the water. It was by Bodines and all the slips. So you pretty much were harnessed to this to Papa Booth. They always called him
Papa Booth?
Papa Booth. Papa
Yeah.
Booth.
What was his first name?
Well, it was Booth Fisheries.
Oh, you mean, I see.
They always just called it Papa Booth
Yeah.
because he never let you go hungry. I'll tell you that. So, cause but that's when I went to when I went over to Benin's over there then in the '70s,
Mm-hmm.
early '70s.
Well, when did Booth fishery, how long did they last here?
Well, I think it was.
Because they weren't here in the 80s.
No.
When did
They were good. See, Roger bought that out. I'd say it was in the '60s.
In the
60,
60s.
yeah, in the '60s, late '60s, mid '60s. Let's put it that way. Because Roger bought Booth Fisheries out,
And that's when the fishing was down anyway.
going down. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Well, that's when he bought out. Bodines bought out of Alkeen just before that.
Mm-hmm.
So, Booth had their own. They had the Apostle Islands. They fished herring on their own too, and so did out of Alkeen had the Penguin. They built a big steel boat, and they used to run. That's when they used to use that to pick up fish around the islands.
Mm-hmm.
The Penguin and the Apostles. And Irv Hadman, my dad worked on the fish hawk.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, for Irv Hadlin picking up fish. So there was a lot of.
So how big were the boats that would go out and pick up fish?
Well, the Apostle Island, she was about 55. The Penguin was 55 footer. The old fish hawk was just maybe 40 foot. This wooden boat.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And when did Irv Hadlin quit?
well, he more or less quit after when Irv. See, I think it was 49 when I showed you the picture of the Josephine Addison when that whole dock got washed out.
Mm-hmm.
That's when he just kind of, because the whole thing that he had a hardware store on the end of that dock out there too.
Mm-hmm.
And you still find a lot of bolts, nuts and bolts down the bottom of that slip at the boathouse, Blackout Boathouse. It wiped the whole thing out, cleaned the whole, like there was nothing there. And that big, it was in the fall of the year, that storm too.
So that was the end of his.
That was it, and that's when he went into Viking Motors. That's how and then before he died, well, that's where Harold Mackey bought out Irv. I mean, Irv never was. He could be broke one day and he'd be back in the bucks the next day. He never gave up. He was a tough Norwegian, I'll tell you.
Now, what was Viking Motors?
That's where the Super Saver is now.
Yeah.
He had the school buses
Mm-hmm.
in the garage there, sold gas. And
Uh-huh.
that's what when he moved up there, as after he bought that and he moved out of with his fish business, wanting to drink. So.
Well, back to your own early days of fishing. So who taught you how to fish?
Well,
And where to go and where to find the fish
well,
and all of
I was
that?
with my grandfather,
Martin.
Martin.
So you went along with him as a kid then?
Yeah, I was along with his kid, and I was. There's a couple spots out the lake. I mean, see, they all found these spots, you know, through trying there, and there's one spot out by Hardwood Island there, out there in Hardwood, and I was back on the stern deck spreading the nets, and he was down there slacking away, and he told me to keep that opening on Hardwood and Manitou. You know, and I found out years later, after I had a sounder, a matter of fact, he set the nets and he kind of looked at the range. The range was closed up. And I was pretty young back then. I wasn't really thinking too much about fishing at the time. And he says, put the roller out. I said, well, we're all done. He says, put the roller out. When I tell you the hold up was blowing a little bit, he said, I mean, he was sitting down here watching, and we started out, well, he said, hold it up on the Raspberry Island Sandpoint. Well, that was good, but I was drifting down, see?
Mm-hmm.
And I closed it up, and he said, if you lose that opening, we're going to lift them again, too, so I made damn sure I held the boat up. And years after that, I showed, you know...
So he was teaching you a lesson then?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He taught me a good one there. So I made up my mind after that and anyway, after I got the Cindy and stuff I had, you know, that sounders and everything on her, there's a hole in there, little ravine right down in that range,
Uh-huh.
and that's where the fish were.
Uh-huh. You knew about that.
And so he found all those spots with the sounding lines, and
Mm-hmm.
so.
And so did everyone pretty much have their
Well,
spots staked out, and you didn't go to somebody else's?
no,
Or
as
how
far
did
as
it
the
work?
pond nets, they each one of the guys, because the pond net was built for that certain spot, and so there was just kind of a gentleman's agreement. But as far as fishing gill nets, who was ever there first, that's what I think. You know, back I go out in the lake, it looked like a cedar swamp. That there was nets all over the place. Today there's nothing.
Yeah.
You know, it's just nothing. You can run from here to Rocky and hardly run into a gang of nets.
But in the old days, they were everywhere.
All over. They were all over the lake. I mean, you know. And I always said, well, granted, there was a lot of overfishing, but they should have had maybe better control over it. But it wasn't. They had, all the blame went on to the commercial fishermen, and that was never so. I mean, I don't believe it, because the lamprey, and how come, like the fat trout, Sisquets, there was never ever no restrictions on those, and how those things return so fast that now that's the big problem they got in the lake right now.
What's that?
Them Sisquet trout and fat trout.
There's too many.
Because they're eating up. There's too many fish out there. I never heard like this year, like Craig Hoopman and Martin Peterson's boys, Halverson boys, fishing a few gill nets under the ice and bringing in that kind of fish. Never seen that I never did. And Julian are even way back when the fishing was good. Hell, they were getting over 200 fish to the net. I saw 100, but I'll tell you, I thought that was great. But the one was 5 and 6 all went along fishing out of the ice now. Well, heck, they had fish net over, had a ton of fish last 2 weeks ago. 6 nets, 6 300-foot nets. Eric said, I've never seen nothing like that. They just come up like herring.
And what were the fish in the nets?
Whitefish.
They were whitefish.
All whitefish.
Yeah.
But nobody's really fishing them anymore. There's only a handful left.
Yeah.
So, but the whitefish was pretty stable for quite a few years, a lot of years. But there was nobody fishing them anymore either.
Yeah. Now, back in the old days, what do you primarily fish for besides herring?
Well, there were whitefish, lake trout, and herring, chubs. So, and the chubs are all gone because the fat trout and all these exotic fish that the DNR put in there ate them up. Especially the fats. That's what cleaned out the chubs.
Now, what's the difference between a fat trout and a lake trout?
Well, there's two different species there. A lot of people can't tell them apart, but I can. I mean, they got the little round nose on them, and their tail. Where lake trout, their tails are peaked.
Mm-hmm.
The tail comes to a point, and the fats are little rounded tails, and the fat inside of them, I'm like a pig. They're just big, thick.
So is there a market for those things? Or?
There used to be years ago. They used to salt them, and they sold them to the coal miners, saltfish. And after you salt them, the fat kind of you scrape it away, it disappears pretty good. But it's even in like a marbling in a steak. It's really it's really in the fish.
So, but today there isn't a market for them.
No. They could. I know. Jackie Ivano from Port Wing, he and another couple of guys were trying to work on a deal for making fish oil for heart problems.
Mm-hmm.
That was up to a few years ago, but that fell by the wayside. And I think they still could develop a market for it, but nobody seems to want to do it. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And because I made a comment on Madison a few years ago before they put us out. I said, you're going to have more problems on this lake than you are with a few commercial fishermen, because the Sisquets are going to take over. And they never did they knew they were there. They never did a thing about it until the sportsmen started bitching. Then, because there's Bill Smith, he was in Madison, he was in he was down in Spooner at the time, and he said, I remember you making that comment. And I said, well, now you got the problem. So.
But in the old days, they were plentiful.
Oh yeah.
So when did you start fishing? What time of year?
For what?
When did you first go out?
Well, as soon as like in the spring, as soon as we could get out.
What would be the March, April?
March. I've gotten out on March 1st of March. It was a mistake.
Why? What happened?
Well, we got in one hell of a blow. It was Morse Matan and myself with Jim Meyer and Cindy. We got out of Port Wing and should have waited a couple of days more. We got the nets back, but they were so tore up.
Oh.
90 miles an hour winds, southeast that time.
But you made it back to port.
Well, no, we were anchored outside down by Cat Island that night. And Morse, we were up all night long, and Morse kept the engine running. I was tied behind him. He kept the engine idling on the Ginmore because they were dragging the anchor off the beach. Mm-hmm. We were right up tight as we could get. There was about, there must have been a cord of wood laying on the roof of the boat the next morning. All them branches were blowing off the shore.
Oh boy!
It wasn't a very nice night.
Were you saying your prayers?
Yeah, I guess so, yeah. I was getting a little concerned about that time. Yeah. Everybody, we looked back, I could see the towers up there at the hill that everybody was bitching about, them radio towers up there. They look good. I said, here, to think I got a nice warm bed just about a half a mile down the hill from there. I said, I wish I was there. It was Bucky Patan, and he was with me, and then I think Bobby Nelson was there with Morse and Deanie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they was in that safari. It was a terrible, terrible night. We set a lot of nets. It was dead calm, beautiful day, and
suddenly it came up.
Came up.
Yeah.
There was a lot of ice, and we couldn't get into Rocky. We couldn't get. That was the only place to get behind any island. Other the big lake was open. See, ice drifting around. So,
What are some of the other close calls you've had out there?
we came in one time, it was, I think I can remember, from lifting chubs outside of Outer Island in the fall. And I got pictures of the Cindy too, of, we knocked the ice off her 3 times. And old Howard Russell was still living on that, he was still alive then, and he clocked the winds were 70 miles an hour. And this was in the late December, we were coming in. And we had knocked the ice off for 3 or 4, we had to sneak up behind the island, just coming across the channel, but it turned to 15 below, about 10 below zero. And that was a little hairy night, or afternoon, where normally I can run from Anderson Point to Bayfield in an hour and 30 minutes. Took it 5 hours to come home. And I said, I think we had to get in, like I said, we got in behind the islands a couple times and chopped the ice off the boat. And finally got to Bayfield, she was listing over. She had a hell of a list to her. Could hardly get out, they had to pound the gangways open to get out. So, the worst experience I think I ever had, and that was with Mel and Gilmore Young and the old Marie, that boat that's laying up at Jackie's.
Mm-hmm.
And we left Matt and I and put the boat in the water the first day of March. It was a beautiful, sunshiny day. Matter of fact, we were going around Troy Point. Mel used to shoot a lot. Mm-hmm. And I was sitting up on the roof of the boat in the back, my shirt sleeve. First day of March. And all of a sudden, the pilot house window come open and Mel fires a whole roll of snuff out. And I could still see that. It was we were running through that skim ice,
Yeah.
about inch ice. I could still see that thing sliding across. Next thing I know, the other window come open, and Gilbert fires out a whole carton of cigarettes, a whole full carton, because they were betting either one of them. You'll never be able to quit shooting. Mel said, "You'll never be able to quit smoking." The next morning, on Rocky Island, it turned 10 below zero. We laid in there for 1 full week.
Ooh.
Julian finally came down from Port Wing with a mermaid, and we froze in there. So then we went out to set the nets a week later after the boat was laying there rolling by the dock, and my God. And so then I can still see Mel and Julian, Mel and Gilmore. Gilmore was running around the long old shacks looking for cigarette butts after 10 days.
Yeah.
Well, then we went out and set the nets, and we had 72 boxes of nets in the old Marie. And we got in one hell of a storm. Hour and a half outside of Rocky Island, north of Rocky. We were running through that pancake ice going out that morning, but didn't really notice. And Julian was up west of us, so there wasn't much ice, so he turned around, came back in. So Mal kept on running, and so we got where we wanted to go. And then she really hit. And so Mal was seriously thinking of throwing the nets overboard. Because we'd have sunk, it was so loaded, so heavy. And we set them 4 gangs of nets. And I looked out, and that's the only time I ever got seasick. I was scared, so, I looked out and there was a sea coming rolling. And I jumped inside, and they had a coal stove in there, and the water come down the goddamn chimney and running out the ash pan. And jeez, I'll tell you.
How big were the seas, do you think?
Oh, they had to be 20 feet in the air.
Yeah.
And I thought when that sea hit her, it seemed like I thought we were going to the bottom. Because it seemed like it took forever for her to come back up. And finally, water was pouring through the gangways, and we set all the nets and came home that night.
So what do? Just hang on and hope?
Yeah, Well, Mel was. I said Uncle Mel was seriously thinking of throwing the nets overboard to get her up, to get the boat up out of the water, because she was loaded so heavy. and that's not a very big boat. And we left with a full. He always then got in. Mel says, "Nobody ate no lunch." And so I said, "I better have a lunch." I said, "I'm sick." I was scared more than anything.
Yeah.
I think it was just. I thought it was the end of the world right there. And I said, "How come you're not eating?" that big box of lunch you had in the morning, it was still the same. We got back to Rocky that night. And we had no radios, no nothing,
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was getting dark coming back in. I know Julian was really worried, and they were back in earlier because they got into the storm before we did.
So they knew it was.
They
They
knew.
had some warning.
It was hell out there, I'll tell you. But that's the only time. That's the worst experience. I never want to ever have it again.
Yeah.
I had nightmares over that one. So
But you got back on the boat.
got back, got back out again. So
Yeah.
I never quit. Sometimes you see about these guys up in Alaska and stuff, and they know how dangerous it is. So the next thing they're back out there again.
Yeah.
I never thought. Boy, I tell you, that was one hairy experience.
Now, what year would that have been? Do you think?
That was not. That was in. Trying to say. Maybe 50, 51, 52.
Mm-hmm.
I was about old enough to drink. I was about 21 years old then. Yeah, and I didn't have my own boat at that time or nothing. I'd fish with Mal early in the spring. And
Now, did you ever stay out at the fish camps out on the islands?
Oh,
in
yeah.
the summer. Where did you stay?
on Rocky. Yeah.
And who had which cabins were they?
Well, with Mal's cabin.
Mel had a
My-
cabin out there.
Yeah, well, my grandfather owned. He owned the property first there, where the cabin is right today. So Grandpa always said, I might never be able to keep nothing else, because the taxes are only $2 a year.
Is that right?
Yeah, and so then when Mel, after Grandpa, I think he bought it, or Grandpa gave it to him in '70. Give him the property, but he already had the cabin up there.
Mm-hmm.
That old black shack. We used to stay in that old black. You've been out there, haven't you?
Yeah.
That black shack down below there.
Mm-hmm.
That's all that was there at the time. Then Mel, later years, built that up there on top. But he built that there, and then but Grandpa still owned the property. And then he turned it over to him just before he died.
So how long would you stay out there then?
We'd stay out there when I was a little kid. We'd stay out there during the summer, for a week, maybe at a time.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't stay there as long as a lot of them other guys I have, and brothers, and they stayed out there steady. I had to get to town. So,
Well, from
and
what
I never
hear, though,
never thought back then. I hated that place, because you had to stay out there. Jeez, I never thought I'd ever enjoy it in later life.
Right.
It's kind of funny.
Well, it wasn't a dry island though, from what I hear.
No. No. Oh, we stayed out there when I left with even when I had the Cindy. We always left from Port Wing. I always kept her up there to get down early, so we'd stay there for a couple of weeks before we ever got out down. Before the ice was all ice inside here,
Uh-huh.
so we stayed out there a lot in the spring. A lot. Spent a lot of nights out there. We'd stay there for 2-3 days or more, and then we'd run back to Port Wing.
And dump the fish.
Unload the fish and head back down again.
Well, did you have ice out there?
Well, we were lots of ice.
It was spring.
Yeah, early
Yeah,
in the
okay.
spring we were.
What about during the summer though?
Well, that's when the like Booth Fisheries and Ottawa Keenan, they used to bring ice out. They bring groceries out.
Mm-hmm.
I never spent that much time out there then though. It was early, more or less.
That was
early-
sort of before your time. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, I was during there at that time, but they had better, faster boats, and after the '40s. But there were still a lot of guys that stayed out there all the time. Even after the during the war and stuff. But they were catching so much fish that they'd bring them in themselves. But this, that all started way back when they had them old 1-lugger boats and 5-mile-an-hour boats and stuff. But a lot of guys, I know Julian spent a lot of time out there all summer. Well, Bobby was out there as a little kid. Mel stayed a lot of times out there.
Mm-hmm.
But Julian was fishing gill nets. When Mal was more or less, he was fishing pond nets. So he, get a lot more fish and stuff, and so he had to bring them to town. And then there was, the Hannon brothers stayed out there pretty much all week too.
Mm-hmm.
But their fish was being picked up. But at that, when they were getting all the pond net fish, there was a more volume. So they couldn't leave them out to that, Even they would pick them up every day, but it just got to be too much for the boats. Too much handling, let's put it that way. It was easier for them to run the Bayfield. So, like I said, Mal, he fished pond nets more than the rest of them. The rest of them were all gill net fishermen at that time out there.
Mm-hmm.
Ole Olson, yeah, he fished. He fished on Rocky too. We had pond nets too, but he stayed there pretty much all summer long.
Yeah, that must have been quite a scene out there.
It was, yeah, it really, yeah, there was, they talk about, I look out there today, and if I didn't really know where those fish camps were, you'd never find them. They're Mother Nature, they always worried about Mother Nature not taking her back. They took that one back.
Yeah.
There was up above where Julian's cabins are, there was 1, 2, 3. There was 3 fishermen in there. Philip Winslow, Ole Olson, and Ole was down on the other side. But Elmer Hendrickson, they were all up above there. I can't remember who the third one was. Above where Julian's cabins are now.
Mm-hmm.
Up towards the Hadlin's cabin there. Then there was Ted Neese, Ole Olson, Yammer Olson, they were all below. So there was quite a few camps out there. The docks are gone, everything's gone.
Yeah.
The only reason Mal's dock is there, Julian's dock is there, they did a lot of maintenance on them.
Right. So there used to be quite a few docks.
Oh yeah,
Everyone
had their own little dock.
had their own dock, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, did you have to, is the water deep enough? Did you have to anchor off shore?
Well, they always anchored out anyway, because in northeast is so. They always had their own little anchor spots out there,
Uh-huh.
which they do yet today.
And then you'd take a skiff to come in.
Yeah, take a skiff to shore.
Uh-huh.
And I know a lot of times, even when I stayed out there in the spring, you couldn't anchor out because there's too much ice around. And I know a lot of nights we got up and had to run over the South Twin to get it because the northeaster came up in the middle of the night. And then we had to jump in and go over there and lay the rest of the night beside the boat. Get out of the bed and go over there. It was nice.
The dead of night.
Yeah, a lot of midnights. Even when I fished with Mal out there early in the spring, as cold as it was, Mal always left that in his bedroom there. He always left that window cracked a little bit. So I'd wake him up in that wind, because as soon as that wind come there, he knew it was out of the northeast, and he'd get us up and away we'd go.
Oh boy.
Then maybe 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. Get the hell out of there. Back then, but those guys didn't have no radar, or no radios, no sounders, nothing. I mean, in the later years when I was there, at least we left, but I could turn the radar on and see where the hell I was going anyway.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget even Ed, my dad, and later he fished. He always had that watch with him. Time and course.
Yeah.
And that's the way I was brought up too. Because Grandpa, he was always, and that son of a gun, I swear to God, he could smell them buoys. If fog didn't make no difference. He'd run out there, and there they were. Stop the boat, and a lot of times I'd see the buoy, and hoping he wouldn't see it.
Yeah.
Made a mistake there. Because he'd circle and circle. We could have got home a couple hours earlier. He'd stay there. It happened once to me, and I says, after that, If I spotted it before anybody else did, I told them it was there.
Yeah. Okay, I gotta put a new tape in now. Okay. Where were we?
Well, we talked about a little about time and course and all.
Oh yeah, yeah. There you were. No radar, no radio.
No radio, no radars, no nothing, and even in latter years after I had all that stuff on my boat, I just was amazed how these old timers got around this lake without none of that equipment. You know, they took great pride. I mean, they had to be some good navigators to do this and get back home. A lot of them didn't make it, but there was always a story about Carl Ludvigsen and Wally Young. It was on a Saturday.
Hang on, Jimmy. Okay.
Yeah, that was a story that the old timers always told about Carl Ludvigsen and this Wally Young. He was fishing fats way down below Michigan Island, and foggier and the son of a gun. And old Carl was a guy that he would never give up, you know. And so Wally seen the buoy. It was on a Saturday. He liked to get back to town early, and finally he saw it on the way out because he was running right down on where that buoy was, and he shut the boat down. He said, "Well, it's got to be here someplace." And Wally seen the thing and didn't say nothing. He figured, well, that old Norwegian will forget about this. We'll go to home early. Where they would have been back to Bayfield about 3 in the afternoon. They got in at 9 o'clock that night on a Saturday night.
Oh.
So finally, Carl was circling and circling and circling. But way late in the afternoon, he says, "I see him now, Wally." But made a believer out of him too. If he seen it, because he knew he said that old devil wouldn't give up. He said he was scared all night long. So
You wanted to get in on Saturday night.
oh yeah. Yeah, Jim Frost and I fished together for quite a few years. I mean, you know, especially when the DNR put us on all its restrictions, so we were making enough so we partnered up.
Did you?
Yeah.
What boat was that?
Well, we either used a Ruby Ann. I used mine. I used a Cindy Bree one week, and then we used a Ruby Ann the next week.
Mm-hmm.
So it worked out all right. Whatever we got, we didn't have to pay no hired men because you couldn't do no fishing
Right.
to make it pay.
So how many years did you fish in altogether?
Altogether, I put in 2 years ago. I think I had 55 years of fishing herring. I had a license for 49
Mm-hmm.
commercial fishing, but I fished more than that. And I was out with Deanie on the Cindy 2 years ago, and I said, Grandpa Erickson, he put in 63 years of fishing herring in Bayfield. And I said, well, I thought to myself, you can keep the record.
Yeah, that's right.
He could have it. I had 50-some and about 55 years of fishing herring. Even, we never really quit fishing herring, even when it was bad. I mean, we fished top nets or did something. We never got the volume of herring we did years ago, but we kept on anyway a little bit because the price was pretty good back then.
Mm-hmm.
We started fishing top nets for the bigger herring in the fall, and that's as far as bringing them in by the tons anymore. There's a lot of herring out there now.
Is that right?
Oh yeah, you could load a boat up just like they did back in the heyday. Cause I was with Deanie a couple of years, well, all you can handle, I mean, you gotta dress them now, and you gotta pick them out of the nets, you gotta clean them, you gotta do the whole 9 yards, so.
Right.
But years ago, they just brought the fish in, and they always had a crew dressing the fish, but they're not that way anymore.
Yeah.
Whatever you catch, you gotta clean. So.
Now, all this time too, were you running the farm too? I mean, I know Martin, he always had a farm going.
Yeah, they
Didn't he?
always had the farm going. And, well, my grandma run the farm pretty much. And, well, Grandpa was hip too, but he always joked about one thing. He says, Christine never loses any money farming as long as I make good fishing. Farm always made money, he said.
Yeah.
But he knew different. So, but I done the same thing all my life. You know, Muriel and I bought this place in 2 years. If we got married in '56, we bought this place. And I still got the original old farm. That's where my son Fred lives back there now.
Right.
That'll never be sold. So
you really had to have both to survive.
yeah, you had a. That's why everybody says it's such a. You know, and Muriel and I built up this farm up here, but it took a lot of sweat, a lot of money, of our own money to keep it going. And she taught school for 29 years, and I commercial fish, and that's, you know. But now it's finally turned around. It took a hell of a long time to get it so where it's paying for itself a little bit anyway.
Yeah. Right.
And I said with this, Muriel put that store in there, and it all helped. And so, and I'm still planting apple trees. I ordered some more of this for next spring again.
It's good.
I'll be 74 in May. And I was when Grandpa Erickson planted the last trees on the old farm. Yeah, I think he was in his 80s. And Olaf Salford said to him, the guy that owned this place, he said, Martin, you'll never live long enough to pick them. And by God, he was picking some of the apples that he planted. So I guess you got to think in the positive direction. So
Yeah.
through the thick and the thin, you can't give up. You just got to keep on plugging along.
Well, what I keep when hearing these stories, also, I mean, everyone worked.
Yeah, it was a lot of hard, And commercial fishing was no easy. It was a lot of hard work in that. So.
Then you had to come in and work some more at Morty's, right?
Oh yeah, we spent a little time down there too. Yeah, down the bases, down the juniors. Always found enough time for that too.
Well, you'd come in what? When would you usually come in off the lake?
Well,
What was a normal day for you, let's say?
well, we'd leave at 5 and back at 6. 5 hours till 6 o'clock at night. 5, all the way for 10, 12 hours at least. But then we were fishing fat trout down below Outer Island there. I used to, we'd leave here and I'd stay overnight at Rocky. We'd lift gill nets inside, then I'd leave the island at like 3 o'clock in the morning. Run, so we were fishing. Then we'd run another 3 hours from Rocky down below Outer Island. And so that was a goddamn long day then. But we used to do that once a week, at least to stay at Rocky during the summer, even overnight.
Mm-hmm.
Then come back and get back in at 6, 7 o'clock at night when the moment have to start spraying or something till dark, spraying the orchard. But I never raised a lot of strawberries back then like I do now.
Those take more work.
Well, yeah, but it's just, it takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
I had a small patch, but then Muriel used to have her school teacher friends help her pick.
Mm-hmm.
Because they always used to joke about it. They say, well, you have to have a degree in teaching to go and pick strawberries. Mary Larson is that much.
Right.
So I just had a small patch. I don't want to get too big, you know. I don't want to push it too hard. So, but no, I quit the fishing, so I put more of my time in the farm.
Yeah.
I often think sometime how in the hell I did it, but and I had a trolling boat too for 21 years too.
You did?
Yeah, had that running too.
Now, what boat was that?
The old Murray line. It's laying down there by its dockyard.
Mm-hmm.
Kenny said he's going to put it up in someplace. 54 Chris Craft.
Mm-hmm.
It was a beautiful boat. I used to keep it all varnished up and looking really great, but she went to hell.
Now, what years were you trolling at a trolling outfit?
Before through the 70s,
Mm-hmm.
80s. Yeah.
Was that out of necessity? Because
Well,
commercial fishing wasn't that good, or?
Yeah,
Huh?
yeah, it was. Well, Jim Frosson bought a boat too that time, a trolling boat, because the fishing wasn't that great, and they were putting the restrictions on us,
Right.
and so we were mostly I used to fish during the summer. We'd fish chubs too, but then the chubs just kind of disappeared. So that's when we went into what the trolling boat. Thought it was going to make a ton of money, and never did. Paid for it, that's about it. But I had it 21 years anyway. So I never run it. I run it myself quite a bit the first 2 years. I got it paid for. I put somebody else on it then. I never really liked the charter business.
You didn't?
No.
How come?
You get a good group of people out there, and I guess I didn't have enough patience to sit there and watch those hooks drag behind the boat, and it was just kind of it was very boring for as I'm concerned. That's that little boat I got now. There's never been a fish caught off the back end of it. I don't know, a lot of people love it, and I don't blame them.
Mm-hmm.
But I just never cared for it.
Okay. So we were talking about trolling.
Well, yeah, like I said, I had the trolling boat for 21 years, and I had, Laurie nursed a lot of different, Marv Pavela was the last one to run it for me.
Uh-huh.
And then, then that business kind of went to heck too, because there was so many smaller boats coming out. I remember we'd take them out in the morning and show them where to go. And that same bunch of boats, if you had an afternoon trip or something, you see them same guys out there right where you were. So I don't know, commercial fishing that was the toughest thing I think I ever did in my life, to give up that.
Was it?
It really was.
It was in your blood.
Yeah, I really, and I still think I still love it.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was, I think, give the license up, I said that was one of the toughest things I ever did.
What year was that?
Well, it's got to be, I'm trying to think, about 8 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was about 8 years ago. I got my first one, I got my last one. The first commercial license I ever had, I paid $10 for. The last one I had, I paid $750 for. So the one I paid $750 for, I couldn't use it. So I got my first one too. So
And how old were you when you got your first one?
I was 18.
That was 18, that's right.
Yeah. So a lot of water has run under the dam, I'll tell you.
It has, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of changes too.
A lot of changes, big changes.
Yeah.
You know, the amount of fish that they're catching now, I was thinking when Jack and I were fishing together years ago, we were fishing, 50, 60 nets a day, bringing maybe a couple 100 pounds at the most. That was a good day. Now you hear these young guys today, we didn't get very much today, we only got 700 pounds. I said, maybe someday you might go through that tough time, so you better start saving some of that money. Don't be, but But could come to an end, you know, different cycles, something could happen,
Yeah. Yeah.
so. But right now, there's a lot of fish out there, so.
Well, that's what everyone keeps saying. There's a lot of fish.
A lot of, but there's not no market.
Yeah.
It's a crime what they get for, you know, what they pay for these whitefish down here in the summertime, my God. I never sold fish that cheap. And we were paying 25 cents a gallon for fuel. And you're getting 50, 60 cents a pound. Now they're paying $1.50 for fuel and getting 25, 30 cents a pound for fish.
Is that all?
Well, last summer that whitefish got down that low.
It did.
Sure.
Yeah. Why is that?
I don't know. It's just, there's so many fish, like Lake Michigan, producing so many. And Jeff Bodine was down at Madison a week ago. He made a comment, he says, if everybody, these trout, they're a drug on the market. Nobody wants them, so what are you saving out there? You should be harvesting more of them. Get that market built back up a little bit, but
Right.
anyway. That era of my life is,
Yeah.
but I still talk about it.
Now, who in your heyday? Who were your pals? That you were
Fishing with?
yeah, and hanging out with, and
Oh, it was,
who were your
well, Bucky Batan fished fished with me on the Sydney for quite a few years. But then Laurie Nurse and Jim Frostman, Bucky and myself bought the trap nets in here. You see, we're the first ones that ever had introduced trap nets in this area. Roger Bedin and I were the first ones.
and what made you do that? How did you
Well,
find
it was
out?
pond nets were just such a pain in the ass as far as I was concerned, to getting those sticks out.
Now explain what a pond net is.
A pond net basically is the same as a trap net, but you got to use stakes up, you know,
So it's in shallow water.
shallow water, and yeah, and that basically used just in the summertime. A lot of work to do them, and when the trap nets, they're more efficient.
And how does the trap net work?
It works the same as a pond net, but it's down under the water, you don't see it.
And how is it held there?
By anchored down in big buoys, floats to hold it up.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big square box. It's the same, operates the same way.
So it has an entrance.
Yeah, it runs down, the lead runs in, you got the hearts and you got the tunnel inside the pot. So it basically runs the same way. But Roger and I were the first ones to introduce them back up here. They were outlawed for 50 some years.
Oh, they were.
Oh, definitely. See, when Roger and I got them in here, on permit only. And,
Now, what year would that have been?
gosh, when did Roger get killed? Roger Bedin, I guess. So that was in the 70s too, 80s. Up in the 80s, yeah. Because Roger and I got him in here. Well, then the two of us, we had old cotton nets. And so it didn't work very good. So I was too damn busy. I was trying to do other fishing, and so I quit. And so then Roger kept on with it. He bought some better nets. And so then, like I said, there was, and we bought him out. We bought Roger out because he was trying to fish and trying to get somebody to run the boat. Well, can't do that. I mean, he was getting the guys in the dock down there really didn't know what the hell they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
So then it was Jim Frostman, Larry Nurse, Bucky, Dan, myself bought the trap rig off from Roger. We did good with it. But then, partnership. I've got to go with my wife said, she says, partners, you marry one, that's so. But she always said to, this is never going to work. And she said, who's going to end up with that trap rig is you and Frostman. And that's exactly, he told me she was right, but that's exactly what happened. It was just, well then Then back to the DNR again, we were fishing them down the bay. They wouldn't let us go down there early in the spring when the whitefish were there. They made us go down there in June. Well, hell, the run was over. So they forced us out of that deal. So then Jim and I, we sold it. The matter of fact, well, the boat is on Medal Island right now. Big Arnie bought it. They were building docks, the old Corey M.
Uh-huh.
And the rest of the nets are over in Door County. We sold them to a guy named Teskey over in Door County.
Well, Deanie does trap nets now.
Does very good, very well. They're the only way to go. Deanie and Morris are the.
So that's better than gill nets, you think?
Well, but it all depends what you can catch a lot of fish in gill nets too, but you get a lot more in the trap nets. And we were under restrictions on those traps. Too, when we were fishing, we could only go out so deep.
Mhm.
Now they go up to 90 some feet, which I think is a mistake. You know, didn't seem to hurt the
Well, also
population.
the trap nets, the fish are alive. They're in there
They're
swimming
alive,
around.
but you bring up anything from cold to the top of the surface, you're gonna hurt that fish. You know.
Uh-huh. So how often do you have to check the trap nets?
Well, they can check. They check. A lot of that all depends on how heavy they're running. They'll lift them every day.
They will.
They can go 2-3 days. Or
Mhm.
get a few gilled ones. Nothing didn't hurt nothing. But now they go out deeper now. So we were fishing. The deepest we could go was 60 feet. Now they go out to 90.
Mhm.
But we could only.
And
go
then how deep down is the trap net set?
Well, so we had a 20-foot. The lead had to be 6 feet under the water. Then the pot was down maybe 30 feet.
I see.
Because we had a 30-foot pot down 60 feet of water, so 30 feet under the surface.
Mhm.
But it was kind of tapered up where it went into shore.
Mhm.
But you can set those in any depth of water. Up to I think it's 90 feet. You can't go any deeper than that. So, but see, years ago when the fishing pond nets, you always were done. Fishing pond nets. Well, after the end of July, on the shallower nets, they always had shallow. They had 30-foot nets. 40-foot net was a deep net, and the fishing was over with. You couldn't fish them now. You can fish the goddamn things all
So is
summer.
the water too warm then?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but down deeper, move them out deeper water. That's where the fish go.
Right.
So it happened there.
Well, with your other, like with your gill nets, was it trial and error and kind of experience of where to set
Well,
them? Or?
no, it was you pretty much knew where to go in the spring. I mean, for the whitefish.
Is that something you learned from?
Oh, learn from over there. Yeah.
Yeah.
The different spots and stuff. A lot of times we always used to try to get to whoever got there first. Got the best spots in the spring.
So where would they be?
Well, like early in the spring, you take up around Otter Island and around the island where it was open. When you get out there, a lot of ice inside there. On the banks, you gotta know where they were hanging out, where the trout were, and where they weren't,
Mm-hmm.
But it got so years later, I mean, it was hard to get away from the trout. There were so many. But there's certain spots that there's a lot of whitefish, and the trout aren't so thick. But now the trout are getting so thick that they're moving in there.
Mm-hmm.
And years ago, when you talk to the old timers, they never really depended on lake trout for a living. Their mainstay was whitefish, chubs, and herring.
Uh-huh.
A lot of the guys never really fished. That's what they were after, because the lake trout, they had to go out. Years ago they would run out deep water for them, out beyond the islands, and
Mm-hmm.
there never was. So my grandfather come back today and seen all those trout that's in this bay down there. That was strictly all whitefish. This whole bay down here.
Mm-hmm.
He never believed it.
Now it's trout.
Oh, a lot of trout. There's a lot of whitefish down there too, but you can't fish them. You can't, it's restricted, everything's so restricted so much that was my big argument with DNR. Did you ever try to, they give you so many of the islands, but you ever try to fish on top of the island? You know, you got all these islands, all this, there's more water closed off right today even than there is open for commercial fishing.
What about in the old days when you started? Was there restrictions then?
Oh yeah.
Places you couldn't go?
Oh yeah, definitely. They always stayed, well, they always stayed away from the spawning grounds. I know that's why I was brought up that way. My grandfather, he never believed in, he was a farmer like farmer. You don't take next year's crop here.
Mm-hmm.
Stay the hell off them spawning grounds in spawning season. There was a few guys that violated, but it wasn't that much. And like the lake trout for the eggs, they always went to Gull Island. That was they never went near there. Never fished out there at that time of the year. They pretty much
That's
stayed
where the trout would spawn.
spawning.
Out there at
They
Gull
stayed
Island.
away from the spawning grounds.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know he'd really get ticked off at you. Even in later years, he was fishing with me there, and in no way you want to get up on those reefs, especially for whitefish.
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember years ago when I was just a little kid, we used to have a game warden stay right at the house, and each one of the commercial fishermen, I know Julian did it, Julian Nelson, and Grandpa and Mal, they go and set the nets for them, get the trout, spawning trout, bring them in the hatchery, and then that would be, they never kept the fish. I mean, they got paid so much for doing that.
Right.
Now they do it themselves. They still could save money if they went and hired a commercial fisherman to do it. But the times.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that waterfront must have really been bustling in the old days.
Oh yeah, yeah. I keep on saying, they talk about Bayfield today, and a lot of people have forgotten why Bayfield's here yet today. I mean, the commercial fishing kept it alive. It was kind of talk about well, they never made a lot of money. I mean, but it still supported 3 gas stations, 3 grocery stores, 2 drugstores at one time.
Yeah.
Now we got nothing. It's a false, as far as I'm concerned, it's a false economy. And I depend a lot on the tourists, don't take me wrong.
Yeah, you do.
We do, and that's the only way, and a few people downtown, but as far as, see, each one of the commercial fishermen, they had guys working for them all year round, fixing nets in the wintertime. And so it was helping the economy out. So it's gone.
Yeah. Speaking of fixing nets, you must have done a lot of that in your time.
Oh yeah, lots of it.
Explain how the repairing of nets goes.
Well,
What do you have to do? I mean,
we'd,
where would you do it to start?
I got a little shed out here with
What
snow
about in
going
the
on.
old days? Where would you do it?
That's where I do it.
Yeah.
And my grandfather down in the basement there, he'd seen nets, make new nets. And where the brown house was, he'd seen many, many miles of nets in that place. Back and forth, and we had a reel down there, we reel them up. And we cut off we get a big holes or something. You buy new twine all the time.
Right.
You cut out the bad spots, sold new spots in there on the meters. Sold them across, and that was a tedious job. So
What is it? A special knot that you have to do?
Yeah.
What,
well, sewing it back onto you pick up 4 meshes on a tie. The ties are only 8 inches long.
mm-hmm.
Put up 4 meshes and you half-inch them, and they keep on going down the line. And you got to sew them across. Where if you get some real good twine, but you don't take it. Never took it all out. We just let more or less patching the nets up.
Mm-hmm.
Any big holes or rocks, stumps and stuff with it too. We had a lot of them that ripped right from one end to the other, so we had to reseam them. Get hooked up on the log out there.
And how long were these nets?
Well, the average, 300 feet. And we were allowed to fish 10,000 foot a net a day. Everybody thinks it's a lot, but way back they were fishing 30,000. Lifting 30 boxes of nets a day, that's a lot of.
So a box is 300 feet.
No, a box is 1,000.
1,000.
You got each net is 300, well, 325, 350 some of them. But later they made them 300 feet long for fishing under the ice. For the ones are hard to pull.
So then there's 3 of those in a box.
Yeah,
I see.
they went 325. We always call them 1,000 foot box. 350. We make them on a seaming line. You seam them up. See if we made a 400 footer. And by the time they shrinks up a little bit, they get about 350 on each net. So by the time it gets older. So.
And that's when it was real twine.
Yeah.
'Cause
Well,
now-
I used. Well, the monofilament came in nylon first, so I never fished any of the cotton and linen myself. I used cotton meters, but it was all nylon twine. That came in the 50s, so. But before that, the old guys, they all had, everything was cotton and linen, the mesh, and the little coarser twine. And that was they got better nets today. And back then, you get that coarser twine, that's why they had to use so many nets to catch the fish. If they'd have had the netting they got today, they would have half that twine.
And that the stuff today is the
Monofilament. Use all, and they got, it's all monofilament now.
Yeah.
All except your herring nets. They're all nylon.
They are.
Yeah, They're too hard. It's a real small mesh, 3-inch mesh, and it's a little coarser twine. And I had some of that, but I wouldn't use them. Too hard to handle. With nylon would handle real nice. And but for gill nets, it's a little different. We got a bigger mesh, finer twine. Otherwise, you get a haystack there piling it up, it wouldn't lay down.
So that was winter's work.
We all went out. Did that in pruning apple trees in the wintertime. So I fished under the ice quite a bit, but then I got getting stuck in the slush. I never really made any money under the ice fishing. Back, the equipment, we didn't have them all beat up cars and cut the top off them, and they were junk when we took them out there, and you expect them to go out and really do a hard job. And then the snowmobile came along, and that was better. How we used horses and did everything out there.
Now explain how the ice fishing works with nets.
Well, say you got a 300 foot net,
Yeah.
and that's what they have. That's what they like to use. You got a 100-foot pole, 1x4. Usually use fir pole, and they put it so it's 100 feet long. Nail it together. 5 20-foot boards, and
And what's the pole for?
they cut a hole. You stick that down under the ice. You got a rope tied on the end of it,
Yeah.
and you got another line hanging down. So not too much current. You don't hit any. You go in smooth ice. It's really, you can see the pole a lot of times. But then you get to the end. You got another line to measure that. You go and chop another hole. You got a hook. And you reach around and get the end of the pole. And then you pull it. Then you pull it ahead. Pull it ahead 3 times. So you got a running line on the end of the pole. So after you get to that 3 holes cut, then you pull that net in. Then you go on again and do the same thing over.
I see.
We usually 6, 7, 10 nets at the most in a string. 5, all depends. We usually fish on the banks, and steep in the bank, you would maybe put 3-4 nets in there, 3 nets. Where it kind of leveled off longer sloping banks, you put more nets in.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where your best
And then
fish.
how deep were those nets?
Oh, about 8 feet. Some later years they went to more of a mesh. We got 36 mesh now. But back, most of my life I fished the deepest you could. Well, I started with 24 was the deepest you could go, and that'd be about 6 feet high. But then later years, then they went to 28 mesh. By law, then they went to 30. So most of my life I fished with 30. The deepest I ever was 30 meshes deep. Would be about 9-10 feet.
Mm-hmm.
Now they can go to 36. So, and they had some of them that's up to 50 mesh, but I never could. The Native Americans could use them, but we couldn't. I couldn't. There was too much work with them, tearing them up and ripping them up.
Yeah.
So
then how often would you check those nets and pull them in?
well, when the fish like early in the spring, we used to lift a lot of them 1 night, 2 nights at the most, 3 nights. Well, I said 3 nights at the most. And because the water's cold, and if it's summertime, water is warm, you got to lift them every night, otherwise the fish die.
Yeah. But in the winter you could.
Well, in winter you could. Well, then they got it down. You could leave them out there 4 or 5 nights in the wintertime, but they got it now. They got it. You got to lift them every 3 nights because you got to let the trout go.
Mm-hmm.
Release them. You only allowed so many trout, so.
Right.
But getting back, way back, when down the bay, if we ever, when I was going to school, I'd go on the weekends, Grandpa would fish about 6 nets just called it for cook fish. Well, he'd give me half, and we had 6 nets set off the Devil's Hole there. We get whitefish, and it was just all nylon nets back then, and I think it was 14, 15 years old, and I'd go on the weekend, so he'd give you half the fish. Cause you get, if we got a trout down there, hell, he'd take that home and eat it. It was never, very rare. It was kind of a delicacy back then. So now they don't even want them. So
Now in those older days too, did you supply restaurants with the fish too, or did
no,
you just
sold everything to
everything right to the wholesale?
right to the Papa booth.
Yeah, right.
Or have had them there, and out of all Keene.
So would they then provide fish for the restaurants?
Oh yeah. They did all
They were
the
the ones, yeah.
Hardly any of the fishermen. Oh, they doing the time now. I think that's why the only reason they're selling direct, and that helps them get that price up there.
Yeah.
So the extra work, but what the hell are you gonna do? You have to do it. And I know the guys today, they got flaying machines, and so that really, get the direct market. So they're kind of eliminating the middleman by doing this, and so they're getting a better price, so they can average it out better.
Now Bodine's runs a truck out of here.
Every once or twice a week.
And does anybody else do direct?
To the store, to the restaurants?
Yeah.
Well, I know Deanie does. Deanie Halverson, he does. He got quite a few, got his own restaurants locally mostly, but he's got a few, I don't know, he's kind of talking about spreading out a little further now. So.
Make a circuit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Morris Patan has restaurants too.
Yeah, he provides for Maggie's, I know.
Maggie's and the hotel and a few more, and then Washburn. So, but Bodine is spread out. He's over in Ironwood. He's all,
Yeah, because he runs that refrigerator truck
Right.
out of here.
Yeah. And then I know Dean hauls all his own herring to Duluth.
Does he?
All of it. Yeah. He had a real good herring season last fall. And well, same with Morrison or Craig. They got their own truck.
They do.
Yeah. Well, yeah. He's trucking his own fish too.
Mm-hmm.
They just started that up the last couple of years, so. Deanie got a reefer truck too. A big one out of it, but he's got some markets that come right to this. But then I know he delivers, his wife delivers all the fish to all the restaurants. They got quite a restaurant business. And that, like I said,
Yeah.
that brings up the.
Yeah, then you're not getting retail, but you're getting somewhere between wholesale and retail.
Well, yeah, but then you get that average up.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
price of fish up. What you need. So, I told you,
Boy,
we're supposed to calm down. Now she's coming again.
yeah, I thought it was. I'm sick of shoveling.
Yeah. So,
Well, what else have we missed here, Jimmy?
well, if I can, you ask me, I can think of it. What kind of, what Jack and what they do? It's-
Huh? Well, same type of thing. I mean,
Yeah.
what I really been focusing on is the kind of the heyday of fishing.
The heyday fishing,
The,
right.
the early days in the
The
beginning.
early days
of
of
it,
that, yeah.
You know.
And
When, what were those herring sheds like, where they picked the herring?
they were just made out of they weren't insulated by any mud. You were freezing on one side and cooking on the other. Had an old coal stove in there, and each one of the fishermen had their own shed, and you pull the nets out of the boat up onto a table, and they'd all stand there. Had Native Americans, a lot of everybody that wanted to pick, work.
I
They
mean,
did a
everybody
job.
in town was doing it.
Everybody. They used to let school out early in the afternoon, maybe by 1 o'clock, because the boats are usually in about noon. And so they kept, a lot of times they let them out at, the high school kids out at noon that wanted to work.
Yeah.
But they'd go down and check on you too. You better be there. And, cause I'd get out of school and go down and pick herring when 13, 14 years old, 15 years old.
What would you get paid?
I think he paid maybe 50 cents an hour or something. It was big bucks.
Yeah, that's right.
It was big bucks.
And that lasted about 3 weeks then, so it was
Yeah.
a real flurry then
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah. But that was,
And Jack, I think it was Jack was saying then you finish picking, everybody, they keep their slickers on, everybody go in the bar together and the whole place smelled like a herring
oh
shed.
God. Morty, he'd go crazy.
Would he?
Oh God, we did it just to aggravate him a little bit. But go through the orders on. Yeah. And he didn't like that because Morty was such a meticulous. He'd be picking hairy scales off them glasses and stuff. One thing he would throw you out if you bought smokefish in there.
Is that right?
Oh, because while you're eating smokefish, and we get on the glasses, you couldn't get it off.
Right.
So, then the little Henry Johnson used to bring them in along. He'd meet Henry at the door, kind of frisk him down, make sure he didn't have any smokefish. So, yeah, it was quite a gang of guys back then, I'll tell you. I can remember Uncle Mel being in the Mortys, and he'd say, "Hey, Morty, I'm going to throw a couple of whitefish up on the bar, money." So, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Muriel didn't appreciate some of those days, but
Well, everybody was there, right?
yeah, they were all there.
Yeah.
Yeah. There wasn't much to do here around here then in the wintertime, but fishing.
Yeah.
A lot of guys, the Morse, they really worked at it hard. And Jack and I fished together for many, many years under the ice. We never really fished that much on the boat together, but we fished under the ice a lot together.
So that'd be December, January.
Well, it never really into February. Like outside, we never really got any really good ice where you could depend on it outside, amongst the islands. So a lot of times you go out there, we put the nets on, tie 'em on real light strings. If the ice went, we'd have to go back and wait for the ice to make, then go grapple the nets back up again, which was not very much fun.
Yeah.
So,
And could be dangerous.
well, yeah, well,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
Do you remember anybody ever going through the ice?
Well, the power was over. Well, I can't remember if they were bobbing that time. Orville Powers and his brother George had drowned up by Wilson Island. There were two of the Model A. I think they were gillnet fishing, but it was before my time. I can remember that. I remember what had happened, but I wasn't fishing at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And they never did find Orville. Never did find George. Never did find him.
Is that right?
So it was, yeah, the Model A went down and right off the north end of Wilson Island, up in southwest corner of Wilson Island. They had a gang of nets there, and hit the one spot. As far as any of the other guy, not that I know of, I can't remember of any of them drowning.
Yeah.
A lot of them fell through, but they got out. I know, talking with Grandpa in the spring of the year, he used to stay there till the last dog was hung, and he used to use skis, big long skis, and he'd ski down there and pull the nets out and put them on a little sled and pull them back home. But that's all. It was getting kind of late in the year then. But then they didn't have no big boats either to get out and do any fishing, so they stayed as long as they could.
Yeah.
I know Malcolm Mal and they had dog teams out there then. You know, and they came in off the ice. And I remember one time Grandpa come home, he didn't have no gloves. He took his gloves, even took his socks off and cut them up and wrapped them around the dog's feet because they were bleeding on the ice, that candle ice. He come over, walked home just with the boots on, no socks.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So they got a lot better with snowbills today than they had back then.
I don't know how they all did it.
I don't either. It was tough going. They all had a dog team. Everybody back then there was no stray dogs around, because if there was a stray dog running around town, he had a harness. He had a harness on. They come down in the morning before those guys go out on the ice in the morning. A lot of them stayed at on one of the shacks on the island. We go out there maybe for a week, They had to freeze the fish they caught and haul them in. There'd be more goddamn dog fights and harnesses all tangled up in front of the grocery stores down there.
Another era.
Another era is gone, yep. But way back, I guess as I go back, I want to go back to the 40s, so, which was, and I was around with fishing all my life. I mean, so a lot of people, I think I was born in a fish box, so I was always down around the docks. Every chance I had was.
Well, when you're a kid, it's an exotic world, huh?
Yeah.
Too?
Well, yeah, there was no TV or,
Yeah.
I was more interested in watching these old Malky and Avon and them guys build boats than anything else. Come over with a few scraps of wood, and that was a good day. Yeah, a lot of us guys used to go down there after school and watch them build them boats. Interesting, it was very interesting.
Yeah.
Go back a few days later, a week later, start out with the keel, pretty soon the ribs are going on. How they ever, that Old Frank, I can still remember with a big long auger putting that shaft hole through there. That really made really thought that was something with a propeller shaft. I think Julian or Bobby's got his. They call it the boat square. It was form the ribs.
Mm-hmm.
They lay that thing and then they bend the ribs. They have little blocks of wood cut, bolted together. You get that shape of the boat going up, and when they bend each rib, then they'd use that. Call it a boat square anyway.
Uh-huh.
To get the right shape as they went along.
Well, it's a real art.
What is? I'm very, I like to stop and see this. This Gary down by Boudin's
Yeah, Gary Couch.
couch.
Yeah.
Yeah, does a nice job
Yeah.
rebuilding. They built that one boat as not a commercial fish boat, but it's a lot of work.
Well, the ones he's restoring, those.
That's the ones he's restoring.
Beautiful
Plus,
old.
he's beautiful.
Oh boy.
So it's basically the same.
Yeah.
That one boat he rebuilt down there, I don't even know what make it was. He didn't hardly even know. He told me the name of it, but the guy brought it in, found it up some old barn out in Minnesota someplace. It looked like an old whaler, round,
Right.
and it was so bad, so rotted. So, but the guy wanted one. He built one identical to it. I don't know, did you were in there to see
Yeah,
it?
I was in there. I saw that one.
That was, what a job. All out of 1-inch cedar. It was a special cedar too. He had it shipped in. It cost $1.98 that boat.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, it's too bad there isn't more boat building going on here.
Yeah. Well, I'm really happy to see this
Yeah.
guy on here do that type of work.
Yeah, when I have company from out of town, I usually go down, bring them down there, and
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Interesting. Gary's such a nice guy too. To talk to.
Yeah.
He found some information on that wooden one I got, that 1937,
Mm-hmm.
and it was in a magazine finally. It was an Eddie. They only made they made a total of 60 of them.
This is the speedboat you're talking about.
That wooden one I got, the
Yeah.
Martha B. They made a total of 60 hulls, and they completed 28 of them. And they went bankrupt in the 30s.
Hmm.
But Gary found that information out of. Yeah, he said I finally found it was in a guy over in Detroit, Michigan. Wrote to this antique boat thing down how was that? I think it was down in Florida. And so this guy thought he had the only one left.
Ah.
So when I called down there, she wouldn't give me his address, telephone number. Well, she said, "Well, give me the telephone number." No, can't do that. She says, Well, do you have his address? So I'll give you his address. She said. So I wrote him, and by God, he was so excited. He didn't come up here. He was going to come up and look at this one, because he thought he had the only one left. There's 3 that I know maybe left of that Eddie Boatworks. One out in Tahoe, and I got one in the guy in Michigan.
And where were the Eddie Boat Works
It
located?
was Bay City, Michigan. That's where
That's where they were built.
yeah, that's where they were built. And this guy did all the research on it. And old Fred Benson was the one that got found this one. He lived in Detroit, works with. I got this one I got. But he bought just the bare hull. And he put all the accessories on it. And I found out it was supposed to have a flathead Ford engine in it. Flathead. That's what was supposed to be in there. So I got a hot rod Chevy in there now.
Yeah.
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 So
And where's the Cindy now?
she's in Corny.
Now who owns that?
Deanie. I sold
Deanie.
her to Deanie Halverson. He fished herring with her every fall. And he uses sometimes he's trying to find a fat market. So then, well, he's got 2 boats now, so got the Jackie 2 and the Cindy Marie. And so he keeps her up in nice shape. When I sold it to him, I said, the only reason I'll sell it to you can't change the name of it. So so I haven't got any daughters anyway. So
And who was it named after?
our oldest daughter Cindy.
Yeah.
So his name's on her yet.
Well, that's immortalized in Wild Rose too.
Yeah,
Boat.
yeah, that is right. She is. Yeah. Well, then Deanie put a new house on it a couple of years ago, and I got the nameplate where she was built in Escanaba.
Mm-hmm.
TD Vanetti company built it. So I took the plate out, I cut the board out, and it was laying there. No, the kids cut it out, and laying in the shed there, and so it looked kind of tough. And so I had Gene Annan make me a real nice board, an oak board, and I had that guy that did all that painting down at the pier. What's his name? Bob, artist.
I don't know who you're talking about.
You ever been in the pier of the bar there?
Yeah.
That Bob, that hangs, little short guy. He's still around town.
I don't know his last name though.
I can't think of it either. But he did all that painting, and when they that plaque that was in the boat, it was on a piece of paper, like they had it glued to the wall.
Yeah.
It was like somebody hand did it, wasn't wrote it on there. The year she was built and all that. So, and it had this Bob. He did the same thing for me. And I gave it to Deanie for Christmas here a couple of years ago. Christ, I thought I'd give him $1 million. So he's putting that back in the boat.
Oh, good. Yeah.
So.
Well, it's good that boat's still going.
Oh yeah, yeah. And he did a lot of work on it, and he keeps it up in real good shape. So. I love that boat.
Yeah.
I always had one regret that Grandpa Erickson always wanted to steal a boat, and when he died, he left me $1,000, and that $1,000 in that money went in that boat. Anyway, so yeah.
Well, we're just about out of tape here again.
Yeah, okay.
Jimmy, so thank you. That's been great.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Yeah. Well, we want to, keep a record of this stuff,
Well, yeah,
And
yeah. It's a lost art,
it is. Yeah. And it's a good history.
Yeah, it was Bayfield. I said the logging was a short-term thing, but the commercial fishing, that's what hung on here.
Yeah.
And maybe
Well, it's diminished, but it's still going on.
it's still going on. There's still a lot of fish out there.
Yeah.
It didn't hurt it any over the years. I'll admit that between the commercial fishing and land free, that's when the pressure really got onto the fish. It couldn't handle the two of them.
Yeah.
But there was no reason for what they're doing today, because they're just screwing up a real resource out there that should be harvested.
Yeah.
It wasn't, like I told that Kanoki one time, I says, I didn't invent the net. I read the Bible, I told him. He didn't like that.
Okay, on that note.
On that note.
All right, thanks, Jimmy.
Oh.